I'm so glad to welcome Jackie and John Melfi. It is our fourth conversation, and I have to say, every single one has been exciting, expansive, reflective, contemplative, and juicy. And so, who doesn't want another one of those conversations? So, I'm really happy to welcome the two of you, and I'd love for you to introduce yourselves in whatever way you choose to in such a context.
Well, sure. But first of all, thank you again for having us on. We really enjoy having conversations with you.
Yeah.
There are all of those things that you mentioned and more. And I am John Melfi. I've owned for many, many years, swingers clubs. The brand currently and for the past 20 plus years is Colette. You can find it at coletleclubs.com. And then Jackie and I together have a website where we talk about our journey in this lifestyle open relationship of ours. It's called openlove101.com. And we have other things going on too, but those are the two main things.
Okay, fantastic. And you have a huge following in both of those arenas. And before you say something, Jackie, I just want to presence that I think people who are not otherwise aware think of swingers as kind of flaky members of society. And your audience, I don't know if there also are those, but the ones who connect with both me and the two of you, I would never describe them as flaky. They are upstanding, intelligent, educated, functioning members of society. And I love that they find a resonance with the two of you and with me because our worlds are different, but there's a through line that is very harmonious and simpatico. Okay, Jackie.
Okay. I'm Jackie Melfi. And like John said, we have our Open Love 101 site where we really do a lot of the same kind of things that you do. You know, we delve deep into relationships and, what that means for the partnership, what it means for each individual. Being introduced to this much different lifestyle from what I grew up with. I'm kind of a Midwest girl, straight and narrow raised. So to reconnect with John from high school and to find out that he owns, swingers clubs was really outside the box for me. And thank goodness I didn't prejudge it, that I kind of took his lead and really dove deep into what exactly it was that he found so interesting and so awe-inspiring about this lifestyle. And so I did a lot of my own research and came to find out
varieties of research, I presume.
Yes. Whether it was scientific. Yes.
Go ahead, say that.
Books, scientific, peer-reviewed articles. It was really interesting to find out that there was a completely different relationship model floating around out there that I knew nothing about. I mean, it's not surprising that I did, considering the way I was raised, but it offered a different opportunity, a different element, a different component to relationships than had ever been offered to me before. I'm not saying what was offered to me was incorrect because it was valuable, but this was just another layer. And for me, it resonated. And so I assumed that there must be other people out there that it's going to resonate with as well. But I wanted to make sure that the message wasn't what I kept running into, which was a very sexualized version of this relationship model. And I wanted to combat that with something much deeper. There really has to be a lot of trust and communication and a really strong foundation to even bring that topic up. And so that's really what John and I focus on. That's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Okay, there's so much about that is really fascinating to me. One of the things is that when you interviewed me on your podcast, I came away with the impression that you discovered you had some kind of fantasy, Jackie, and you brought it to John. And so I love hearing that actually, John, you had the swinger clubs for a while, and it was you who kind of changed the conversation. And I'm not particularly fascinated by my misunderstanding, but I am fascinated by how sort of juicy and that kind of energy came through, even though it was familiar territory for you, John, that Jackie, you let it bubble up in this sort of innocent and provocative way. I just really enjoy that. And before going further, I love if you would say what the relationship model is. You've referred to the new relationship model. Will you describe it to so that someone listening and watching can understand without having met you before?
Well, I know for me, when I think about what type of relationship John and I have, I think from the outside, it looks very traditional. We're married. We fell in love. We got married. We share a home. I have children from a previous relationship. He has children from a previous relationship. Everybody's kind of melded together. We go on vacation and we have this business that we do together.
You file taxes together, I presume.
We file taxes together. We go to the grocery store. We just, from a societal standpoint, we just kind of fit right in with everybody else that's around us. One of the elements, though, that is different is we invite a more open concept. We're not as restrictive from a friendship standpoint or even from a sexual standpoint, our integration with others. If John finds someone interesting, it's perfectly fine for him to carry on a conversation with this person, to go out to eat with this person, or to even, go on a date and let that lead where it leads. Our relationship is solid enough that we can incorporate that into the relationship. If an issue arises, we talk about it. What I love so much about the relationship model that we have is it peels back a lot of those onion skins. It really gets us down into those kind of deep, almost best friend kind of relationship conversations, which is interesting. We'll have those kinds of conversations with a really good girlfriend or, with John, with, one of his trusted guy friends. But sometimes those conversations don't actually happen between the couple, John
Absolutely, because the content would be confronting.
Well, and it's a deal breaker conversation. We've been taught for so long that there's certain things in a marriage that are acceptable and certain things that aren't. And I get it. We all have boundaries. We all have borders. We all have things that we say, this is what I will accept and this is what I won't accept. But I think
actually, if I may interject, I think often people don't say what those boundaries are and expect it to be understood by their partner. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But I do think everyone has boundaries, but I wouldn't agree exactly that they speak them because that requires enough self-awareness to do so.
Well, and that's true. Maybe it's we know what our boundary is, but we're not discussing it with our partner. And so then when something happens, that's when
they're assumed boundaries.
They're assumed.
Yes.
It's not until someone crosses a line on one and someone realizes that they're not really digging that path. That's where and it's normally not a conversation. It's an argument.
Right. That's true. That's true.
And betrayal.
Well,
yes.
And that too, yes.
Exactly.
And then, trust is broken down because of a perceived boundary. So,
well, and we tend to, it's so funny. I was just reading an article yesterday written by a woman that I found on a news site where she had gotten married way back in the 80s, kind of when the Fatal Attraction movie came out, and her partner had cheated on her. And she says, I kind of wish I knew now what I didn't know then. She said, it's so interesting now to be so much more self-reflective on whatever problem was arising in the relationship that where we could have worked much more together. We want to blame our partner for doing something, but what role did I play in that? So I found it kind of encouraging that maybe sometimes are changing, where we're not just automatically moving into this is acceptable, this is not acceptable, but why is this happening? Can we have a discussion as to why is this happening? And I feel like for John and I, in this much more open relationship, we've crossed that particular hurdle. Let's not just assume that our partner's doing something against us, but maybe it's just something that they have a desire to do, or, we want to be a little bit more realistic about who we are just as human beings navigating on the planet. And I like that.
I love that. And I also really appreciate your use of the term relationship model. I've heard you say that before. And I think very often that's another place where assumptions are made that a relationship fits whatever the relationship model is. And people don't really perceive how there are so many adjustable variables in any seemingly fixed scenario. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make an inelegant segue and ask you, John, how did you get into swingers clubs as a business? And did it start as a mission-driven matter, or did you perceive there was emptiness in the market, so why not cash in on the people who are interested? I'm so curious how it arose.
Well, I don't think it's really simple. I've been this way all my life. When I was, my late teens and early 20s, I didn't really label it, or I didn't really know how to define it. I didn't really think about it. I just was who I was. And my dating was not normal. It's one of the reasons why I moved from Kansas to Florida, because I didn't really feel like I fit in there.
Having lived in Kansas for 2 years, I gotcha.
Yeah. And, of course, Jackie stayed, and she stayed in that, that little tiny box that they put us in. And it's not everybody there for sure, but that's how I felt.
It's close to everybody where I lived in Southwest rural Kansas.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I got into the nightclub business in the early 90s, just regular concert venues and nightclubs. And I ended up I met some friends in Amsterdam, and they took me to a club there that was a swingers club. And I realized then in that moment, that's my label. That's who I am. It's really just, I'm kind of like a swinger. And I still don't like labels. I didn't like it then, but I had a better understanding that this is something, I wasn't alone. There's other people. I
think the two of you do an amazing job bringing so much specificity with almost no labeling. I think it's its own art form. I just want to say, because many times when there's no labeling, there's so much murky vagueness and a lack of clarity. And the two of you have so much clarity, so much specificity, so much precision, and you pull that off without labeling. It's quite an impressive feat, just linguistically speaking, never mind what the content is.
No, and she just did it earlier. You asked her what we were, and
I know, I caught it.
Specifically. So from that, I owned a nightclub. I owned a nightclub at that time, and I came back and did some research. And nightclubs struggle. It's really a difficult business to be in. The longevity of a nightclub, a good nightclub, maybe 2 or 3 years. A neighborhood bar, a long time. So much competition. There, fads. This kind of music comes and goes. So you're always having to make changes. And I saw that there were swingers clubs in the States, and some of those clubs had been there a long time. And I thought, it's interesting that this kind of a nightclub can be here. And most of them weren't really nightclubs. They were really places where people would congregate and meet. I decided to open a nightclub with playrooms in it. So it was essentially kind of the club like I saw in Amsterdam, but it was different in the fact I really wanted to focus on the nightclub aspect of it, the dancing and the socializing in that way. And that's what I did. And the club that I have in New Orleans has been open now for 20 plus years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And it showed that my intuition or research on the business model was correct.
Yes.
You ask if there was another reason why, and it did become something else. I had a club in Tampa, and the government tried to close me down there. And then it became, you're treading on my rights to be who I want to be and explore who I am and provide a safe place for others of like mind to do that same thing. It became a movement for me at that time. And it still is today, so I want to provide those safe spaces. Today, I have the finances to be able to fight it if I need to. And I'm not just fighting it for myself or my livelihood. I'm fighting for everyone else out there.
Yes.
And so it's really a combination of both. And that's what Open Love 101 is as well. We really are trying to make it safe for people to say, hey, we're not in this strictly monogamous relationship model anymore. We're going to try, maybe it's just having a threesome occasionally, but they should be able to do that if they want to without repercussions from their job or maybe some people aren't going to like it. You can never change people's minds about how they feel about something, but it should be okay.
Especially sexuality.
It is for sure. And so it's a combination of the both today.
Okay. Well, I've just realized that one of the things that gives me pleasure in speaking with the two of you is asking what I think of as very basic questions, because the depth of your response leads to so much. So here's my next very basic question. So why is it important to have a safe space to be who you are? I mean, that's really a no-brainer. Of course, we all know it is, but you've thought about these things. How would, if let's just say I just have no interest one way or the other in swinging or any of the lifestyle matters that your clubs focus on, tell me why it's important that this exists for those who resonate. I've experienced it. I've experienced the oppression from people that don't understand and the hatred or the bigotry that comes along with it because I'm different than them. And I have also seen other people go through similar experiences where they've lost their job because it was found out they weren't in the traditional monogamous relationship model and their job wasn't going to have any of that. So I have seen that happen. And we live in the United States of America, and for me, it's really important to be able to have the privacy to be who I want to be. And if they start taking that away, it really affects me in a negative way in the people that Jackie and I socialize with. So it is a basic question. I think also we're one of probably the last segments of sexuality that's being oppressed. You're seeing today, especially, more and more openness to everybody. People are allowed to be whoever they want to be. And it has been for a long time. I think for the most part, it is accepted whoever you are. What's happened though is if there's someone that you're working for or something that you belong to, even with me hiring people, I've hired electricians to come in and do work on my club and they found out what kind of club it is. They're like, I can't work here. And then I'm out trying to find somebody else, and you see that in news articles with other things, the case about the cakes. And I understand, and I don't have a problem with that guy not wanting to work there, but it definitely hurts when someone does that. And, what I do, I pick up the phone and I call somebody else. Someone's going to come out here and do the job. Someone needs the work. So Jackie, were you going to say something? You look like you were getting ready to.
It's interesting. That's why I love to do these interviews, is because, you ask this question in John's response, and then I'm just thinking in my own response. Here we are as a couple, and yet we can be like black and white. Just notice that, with how different it is, even though I grew up in what's considered a pretty conservative state, the circle in which I grew up in was very loving and accepting. And so, when I was introduced to what John did, I didn't have the history behind me that John did. So I was naive in the sense that I found something that, to me was incredibly enticing, and it was different. So it was exciting. And I knew how it was making me feel. Someone was here was a relationship model where somebody was asking me what I wanted and how I felt about things. And I realized that that wasn't necessarily the relationship model, that was John, but I associated those two things together. And so I'm out telling everybody what I'm doing. I was excited about it. I was telling my mother, I was telling my siblings, I was in banking for 15 years, for goodness sake. I was telling people at work, you're not going to believe what I found out. This is amazing. I didn't know that there were actually people out there that were losing their jobs, or they were losing custody of their children, or they couldn't have a relationship. They couldn't be respected enough in the relationship model that they had chosen, that they had to keep it silent. And that just seemed ludicrous to me, because my whole platform is, in a society where staying married is difficult enough in and of itself. If you have two people that are working their darndest to make that relationship work and do whatever's necessary, and both feel at peace and both feel liberated, both remain autonomous, yet be able to meld their lives together, why on earth are we not applauding them instead of stigmatizing them? That's when my soapbox appeared. And that's when I was like, oh, no, this is ridiculous. And I've been in both relationship models. Neither one are threatening to each other. They actually work in tandem. We're just finding different platforms from which to make the relationship have the same end result. So
which is more connection, a life together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. And there's no proof that anything that these couples that are doing is causing any kind of harm. There just isn't the data that backs that up. And in a lot of cases, the data shows the opposite, that now you have, especially in family settings, you have much more conversation. I know I've had much more conversation with my adult children because they know they can trust me, that I'm going to give them honest feedback on what I think, and also encourage them to be authentic. I don't care what you do, but you better be able to back it up information wise, whatever. And I want other people to have that value. They say, well, we get a lot of feedback is, why are you married, or why are you talking about your relationship? Because society forces me to, because otherwise people in my relationship model are going to lose their job, or they're going to be treated like they're doing something that's a deficit to society, and it's just not. And
as well as just riddled by shame privately.
Exactly. Because here's the thing, 1 in 5 Americans have either contemplated an open relationship, or they've actually been in one. So if you take just my street, you're going to have 10 people that have, but it's this whole thing of, well, just keep it silent. Don't talk about it, and then we don't have to worry about it. But I'm like, but that's like lying.
And one thing too, that you just mentioned shame. And I think an advantage that we have in talking to our monogamous friends is to help them maybe lessen the amount of shame they feel just in their sexuality with each other.
Yes.
Because I'm sure you deal with it with I call them straight couples that are in a relationship, but maybe they're just into missionary position sex and they're afraid to try anything new. We have some people that we're really close to that had that fear, and we're like, it's okay, nothing's going to happen. Try it. It's just between the two of you.
And actually, I think the issue is even further upstream, because the vast majority of couples are more comfortable having sex than having a conversation about the sex that they are having. And so it's even, even just bringing it up is confronting, let alone what actually happens. But I cut you off. Please continue.
No, you should come to dinner with us and our friends and hear the conversation at the dinner table. It'll blow your mind. The people around us, their minds are blown. They're like, what? They're talking. There's 10 people over there talking about sex. It's amazing. It is really amazing. So,
well, and the thing is that those conversations, the one you have with your your spouse and the ones you have with other couples, they are incredibly important. There's no other arena of, nobody expects to manage their finances without a single conversation with somebody else, or learn to cook without being in the kitchen with somebody else. Like, I'm not saying money or cooking are the same as sex. I just mean that any area where there's growth, self-expression, and it does not come with a manual, conversation with other human beings, the questions that arise. I'm actually in this moment reminded when I started homeschooling. I'm in my 15th year of homeschooling. And the first year I homeschooled, I was part of this group. And once a month, the parents who homeschooled got together and just had a topic, math curriculum, engaging the working parent who's out of the home, or whatever it was. And I didn't have questions, but I got answers to so many things that I didn't even have the advanced state to be asking questions about. And that's at least one of the associations. I mean, I have no question that if 5 couples are having not a shame-based, should kind of conversation about sex, but anything in the authentic realm, that all 5 of them, or all 10 individuals, their sex lives are definitely going to benefit.
Well, and it just speaks to the importance of diversity. I'm going to come at the table with a slightly different perception because of how my relationship is. So I'm not going to automatically shut something down, or I might have the ability to articulate, well, what's going on with you? Maybe it's not so much what's going on with your partner, but maybe it's something that let's talk about that. It's about giving people permission to have those conversations. Mm-hmm. And I think we run into real danger in society when we automatically want to shut that down out of some kind of fear. And that's another reason why, for me, it's really important to come at this from a much deeper level. I think it's just, our relationship model is so stigmatized and it's so sexualized that so many people miss what's actually happening in our relationship.
Yes, and I think that having a context for giving words to it really serves tremendously. The ancient Egyptians had like 40 different words for heavens, and the Inuit and Eskimos have, I think it's 13 different or 15, I forget, but many different words for snow. And one of the things that's really lacking in our society is words for the sensations and the connectedness or lack of it that is felt in our bodies and in our souls during sex. And so another benefit to having conversations is just to, in expanding the linguistic vocabulary, we can also expand our sensual vocabulary too. I want to say something that I suppose a little vulnerable to say, but it just never occurred to me. I'm obviously completely at ease in these conversations, and I'm aware that, of course, in so many different contexts, there's the little HR statement, whether it's hiring or in an educational setting or any kind of situation where you find we don't discriminate on the basis of race, creed, and sexual orientation. And I myself never had it come to mind that sexual orientation would include relationship model as opposed to including homosexuality, heterosexuality, gender identity. But is it legally covered? Has that gone to court where the protection, I mean, not all companies have such a guarantee, of course, but those that do, does that hold up that the relationship model is protected by the phrase of we do not discriminate against sexual orientation on a basis of sexual orientation?
I don't really know that it's been tested. Most of the people that we know that have lost jobs based on, finding out that they were swingers, for lack of a better term, was because of their morality clause that they had.
I see.
So, teachers or maybe military or therapists, someone I know.
In the military?
Oh, yeah.
So this would have been covered by Don't Ask, Don't Tell?
Well, you know what? In speaking to some officers in the military, that's really how they look at things. If you don't get caught, you can cheat. Just don't get caught. And I think a lot of, probably the military sees what we do as cheating, and that's why it gets
thrown in the same category.
Well, I suppose this is totally off topic, but if you're looking at military benefits for significant others, it does get more complex.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that that is not actually the motivation. Okay, well, with our conversation, where would either of you go next?
For me, it's just to continuing what I'm doing. Just making people more aware, just to continue to put out the information that I have, to continue talking to people. I'm part of a neighborhood group, and I absolutely love when I meet somebody new, because you know how it is. Oh, hi, I'm so-and-so. It's nice to meet you. So what do you do? My husband and I own swingers clubs. Wait, what? You just say that. I'm like, absolutely. And it is so interesting. If I take 10 women that I've said that to, I'm going to hear from probably 8 of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna
I mean, with interest.
With interest, they need to talk to somebody about something that's going on in their relationship. And I'm not, I don't say that so that I'm not trying to recruit anybody.
No, I understand that.
I'm not trying to get with anybody, because that's what everybody thinks. It's not that at all. It's about me opening a door to a conversation. Like, they automatically assume that I'm going to be able to speak much more freely about sexuality. And if that's their assumption, that would be true. And it's amazing how much gravitation that is. Mm-hmm. And, I want these women, I want these couples to be happy in their relationship model. How can I help them open that door? How can I help them, take that fantasy and not take it as a threat, but take it as something joyful that they can experience with their partner? I mean, I want everybody to be as happy as I am in my relationship model, because I'm not trying to say that anybody else's relationship model is incorrect and mine's right. I'm not trying to say that at all. I'm trying to say it's your responsibility to create a relationship model that works for you and take pride in that and talk about it. That's the only way we're going to make these changes that need to be made, so that people don't have to talk about what it is that they do. So.
Yeah, when I coach couples, I often have couples create a vision statement for their relationship, because this is what you're saying obviously applies to the relationship model, but it applies to so many other areas of the relationship too. Every time I interview a couple, based on the fact that intimate relationships are the ultimate vehicle for personal growth, I love to ask the same question. So I'll ask you first, John. What have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Jackie?
That's a difficult question. Well, I've learned, I think in the past 11 years, we both have really grown. One of the areas that I think she really helped me in, and it was early on in what you touched upon earlier, when Jackie had a fantasy, and I felt really good about being able to give her the space to talk about it and to experience it at some point, and to not be controlling. And so what I've really learned how to do in the relationship with Jackie is to not be such a controlling guy, because there were some relationships prior to her where I was in a lot of fear, and to control that fear, I would become controlling of the person. And with Jackie, over time, I've learned to let go of that more and more.
That is so beautiful. that really, I hear the answer to this question often, and that just really touches me. And I think that there's a particular way that your relationship model is an invitation for that kind of personal transformation. That's so beautiful. Okay, Jackie, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to John, besides of course, being introduced to everything we've been discussing.
Oh man, I feel like especially probably the last year and a half, there's really been a transformation for me. Even as exotic and enticing and titillating this relationship model was, there was a lot of deconstruction that had to happen for me. Even as much as I wanted this, I had some things that I had to kind of unpack and get real with. And, if it hadn't been for John's patience and his tenacity and his continued support of me kind of reaching down into the depths of who I am and pulling that out and taking a look at it, I think sometimes, we flow through life and we're like, oh, things are going pretty good. And then you're like, well, maybe there are some things that I can really grow past.
Yes.
And so that's what I've had the ability to do. And I think as a result, it's made me a much better partner. I have a different view of who I am, which then, of course, results in how I treat John, how I treat myself, how I feel about myself. So it's been a growth that I couldn't have even told you 11 years ago was going to happen, or that I even needed. But today I can just be like, whew.
And Jackie, it's not just what you have gone through in the past couple of years has enabled you to become a much better friend to other people. The neighborhood group she mentioned, that wasn't possible for her 5 years ago because of some of maybe the way she felt about herself. The work that she's done on herself for our relationship and for herself has helped her in all her relationships with everybody. It's really been an amazing transformation for me to see.
Well, I have so much admiration and respect for you, Jackie, but that particular thing is not unique to you. This is why this work is so important, that when we can get right with our relationships, which we can't really do unless we're right with ourselves, then in the process, we can get right with our interactions with really everyone else in every other context, or at least be able to know where to go when there's a challenge. I really love what the two of you stand for. So thank you so much. We'll have the link to your club down below in the show notes. Anything else that you would like to say about how people can find you and enjoy some of what you provide?
Well, they can find our Open Love site at openlove101.com. I also wrote a book, Swingers Lifestyle, The Questions You Are Afraid to Ask. You can find that on Amazon, or you can find it on the Open Love site. And then, of course, you can also, if you happen to be in the Texas area or in New Orleans, you can visit ColetteClubs.com and you can check out one of our clubs.
Okay, amazing. Do you have people who travel to New Orleans or Texas to visit the clubs after encountering the two of you on social media or in your podcast or whatever?
Yes.
All the time. We're here because we saw your Open Love site and we wanted to check it out. You gave me the courage to come out. I grew up just like you. I've always felt something was missing. Yeah, all the time.
We met somebody in Doha, Qatar, that follows us, and they saw we were coming there, and they reached out to us, and we met them there at a tea house. So
that is pretty radical, right?
It is.
That's amazing. Okay, and my final question: where does the name Colette come from?
My club in Tampa that I had some issues with the government there at the time was called Taboo, and we were expanding the brand, and I felt as though maybe the name drew some bad publicity. So we wanted to find a name that was generic and didn't
ring any bells
or anything like that. Yeah. So, New Orleans is where the next club was, and it has some French history to it. And we had a list of French names and people's names and other types of names. And we just agreed on that, Colette. That's all there is to it.
Well, it has a sexy ring. That's beautiful. Okay, well, I look forward to whenever our next conversation is, and really appreciate both of you for joining me today.
We love talking to you. Thanks so much for having us on, and we'll talk to you soon.